Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you are watching us from. Welcome once again to Career Journeys, a show where we delve into the lives of seasoned professionals, entrepreneurs, and people who inspire us with their stories. With me this afternoon is Bunmi Adekugbe. I'll give him a moment to introduce himself properly in a bit, but I'm so delighted to have him here today, and I know that you are going to enjoy hearing his story. Welcome, Bumi, to Career Journeys.
Thank you, PM, for having me on the show. And good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to everybody who's going to be joining on this podcast. My name, like she mentioned, is Bunmi Adekugbe. I'm a dentist, and I've been a dentist for going on about 20 years now. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. I had the first few years of my educational experience in Nigeria, and then I moved on to grad school here in the United States. I did some other advanced education here, and I've been a business owner for going on 10 years. I'll break it down a little bit more. So I got my dental education at the University of Ibadan, Nigeria. But prior to that, I went to high school at Ilorin, Federal Government College Ilorin, which was a very transformative experience for me as a young man, and went on to grad school at the Harvard School of Public Health. Did something in policy and management, and then went on to the University of Pennsylvania, where I got my dental education and license to practice in the United States. So briefly, that's my educational and professional journey so far.
Very, very impressive educational background. Wow, you've been to some competitive schools. How was it trying to get into those schools, being in that environment, going through those rigorous programs? How was it for you?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, yeah, I think I can say I've been to two Ivy League schools. I've got to train and probably rub mind with some of the brightest minds, at least in academic environments. What was it getting into those institutions? If there was
Even
anything
right from even UI, even
even from
starting
UI,
from
that's true.
PH
That's true.
all the way. Yes.
Yes, so that's true. Yeah, I mean UI. I think one thing that I would say about the journey of getting into competitive academic programs is I think what those programs actually look for, and I think Harvard is the one that spells it out better than any other institution, is they're looking for people with leadership potential. I mean, they want people who they believe are going to be able to make a change in the world. So usually when people ask me that, how do I get into those institutions? I'm like, what's your vision of the world? And what does it mean to you? I think usually when you have a vision of what you see that that can be bettered in the world, and you have figured out a way of clarifying what that is, and you have a plan for being able to at least address it, maybe not solve it, but at least address it, I think you stand a better chance of being able to get into those programs. But I'll even go a step further to say that all those programs are all about world change, how to make the world a better place. So usually when you get in and you kind of have a vision of what you want to do, I think it's a little easier for you to be able to integrate into those programs or into those institutions, and then be able to share your idea and pick ideas from other people. So I really don't think it's not really rocket science. It's just a bunch of people who believe that the world can be a slightly better place, and they think that that's an environment that might bring out the best in them for them to go and affect change in the world.
Wow. So in your vision of, your vision for the future, vision of change, bringing change to the world and in the world, in articulating that, did you ever bring in your vision for entrepreneurship into that picture? Did you see yourself being an entrepreneur as far back as, what, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Um, Oh, no, further back than that,
What are that?
because
Oh yeah, way
you
back, way
started
back.
your medical program, what, 30
Uh,
years ago, or
yes,
thereabout?
about 30 years
Not
ago.
to age us or anything. Not,
No way. I'm just 35 years old, so I started when I was
give and take X years.
yeah. Okay,
Please
so
go ahead.
the journey into entrepreneurship started way back. I kind of find it hard to actually date it, But one thing I've always known was I've always believed in changing the world. And that's because I don't know, maybe it's the way I was raised or the influences I had around me as a young man, but I believe that the world could be in a slightly better place. The issue, I wouldn't say the issue, the what I had to figure out growing up was how. How are you going to make a change in the world? I think early on I found business people. I kind of ran into business people. My mom did business. I mean, she had her own store. My dad had his own store. So I kind of understood commerce, probably not at the highest level possible. But I mean, growing up in Nigeria, like I did, I mean, you get back from school, you go into the shop, you see somebody doing commerce. So commerce was something that kind of intrigued me. Then I think as I started to come into maturity, I kind of started to explore the very idea that is it possible for you to exchange value for is it possible for you to make change while you're exchanging value? So that means that could I have been a preacher? Yes, I could have been. Could I have made a change in the world? I'm sure I could. If I wanted to be a social entrepreneur, meaning I could go into the world and try and make a change in one way possible, I think that's also a possibility. But something that always intrigued me was how do I exchange value and make the world a better place? Something within me kind of, it made sense to me to say, if someone is going to part with something that is precious to them and I'm going to be making them better, then I've got to really, really know what value I'm delivering. So I think early on, and this was even before I graduated school, I was intrigued with the concept of offering value or service in exchange for money, but making the overall system better. So that kind of gave me a little bit of permission to say, you know what, how about if you explore this mechanism of making a change or an impact in the world? I think I did my first, I know I started actively doing business in school. I bought stuff and sold them. I'd go to Lagos and I would see something for a discount. I'm like, it doesn't appear like anybody here has it. I would sell them. I think my first big major attempt at business was a consulting company I started conceptualizing even as a student. So what had happened was we needed to raise some money for a project in school. It was one of our church fellowships. And I went and I spoke to a few alumni. And I'm like, you know what, how about if we did some health talks and we could raise some money? So we had a need. We could have gone the traditional way of handing out cards to alumni and saying, hey, just give us some money. But I approached it a little different. I'm like, hey, how about if we deliver a service and get paid for it? So that kind of that got me thinking about things that I could do in exchange for service. And that was even before I graduated. So I think all that thinking and ideation kind of helped me going into my Harvard program to see exactly what I may be able to offer the world. So business has always been something that's intrigued me. I don't know why, but I
Wow.
just enjoy it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So today, what is life like as an entrepreneur for you?
Oh, thanks. I'm living the dream. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I. What's life for me like as an entrepreneur? The best way I can put the life of an entrepreneur is you must be blind, deaf, and stupid for you to say you want to go where everybody else isn't going. And I
Oh
don't say
wow.
that lightly. Um, Life as an entrepreneur is, I think you're someone who um, you're both an optimist and a realist. You kind of live in a world of what do I call them now? Almost opposites. Opposites in the sense that you're going to be an optimist because you believe in the future that is ahead, but you also have to be a realist because you're dealing with the real world. You have to kind of believe in people, but you also have to verify what you've asked them to do. You're constantly living in this world where most people would think it's abstract, but for you, it's the real world. So I think for me, understanding that that's the world I live, where I'm constantly balancing things that may not appear to be what they look like. It's not ever really as bad as you think it is, and it's never really as this thing. You just have to kind of have an even kill. So if I had to summarize my entrepreneurial journey, is the ability to just live an even keeled life and approach problem solving with that understanding that you're going to come out on the other side of it. I don't know if that kind of answers the question on the abstract level, right?
That's quite insightful. I think that you've spoken to why you cannot just be an idealist as an entrepreneur, right? Because I think so many people want to pursue entrepreneurship. So many people want to, you know, have a vision of being an entrepreneur. They have dreams of starting something, running something, and being the boss. But then many don't reality with practicality, and you said some things about that, and I wish more people did, because then you'd be, I think you'd be better prepared for the pitfalls, for some of the difficulties that are bound to that you are bound to face along the way. So that being said, what have been some of your biggest challenges um, while you've
Hmm.
been on this journey?
Okay, it's been in phases. So there were phases in, so let's see, let's go back 20, 25 years ago. If you had asked me what my biggest challenge is, oh my God, how am I going to get capital? I mean, it looked like I had this big dream that I wanted to achieve, and capital seemed like the biggest challenge. I'll say this, that the life of an entrepreneur is almost in circles, meaning the
Yep.
challenge you have right now is probably not going to be the one you're likely going to have in the next few years, but there will always be a common theme to it. So I'll say 25 years ago, it was capital. Then I think as time went on, it became a knowledge deficit, meaning, you know what, I really don't know as much as I think I need to know. I haven't quite figured out what the problem is. Then as you evolve a little bit more, it becomes people, because right now you do have the capital or access to the capital. So you know, okay, you know what, if I needed to raise a certain amount of money to get this idea going, I probably have access to it, or at least I know how to negotiate it. Then I have a little more expertise or knowledge. Then after a while, it becomes, how do I transfer this knowledge into other people for them to be able to execute? Then it becomes a people challenge, because at that point you're having to train people, depend on people to be able to help you execute on your dream. At some level, once you go beyond the people, then it becomes, how do I grow? Of course, growth is a very, it's delicate. I mean, how much more of our resources are we reinvesting? And some people would say growth is diversifying, meaning I've got this really good thing that I have going. The machine is humming, it's doing everything it's supposed to do. Do I do more of it? Or do I start to
Mhm.
look outside? Do I have an integrated vertical? Or do I want to just keep everything in the business? So I would say it's in various phases, but everything I've just described has pretty much been a constant theme. And then you loop around because you realize that your next area of growth requires a bigger set of capital. And then you get through that capital, you realize I don't know as much as I need to know. Then you
It's
realize
a
that now I
cycle.
know, but I need people to do it. So
Yeah, yeah, wow.
it kind of
Yeah.
loops around in some of those things, around those themes.
Mm. What's your approach to facing challenges and overcoming them?
Ooh, approach to challenges. I think default is, obviously I'm Christian. I'm going to look and say to myself, okay, God, how do we figure this out? But there's a scripture that I've always approached that kind of helps me to look about business. I think it's gosh, I may be mixing it up now, but it talks about people who do business in great waters and they saw
Mm,
God's work in the deep. So what it simply means is the way it was described by the whoever wrote that. I think David might have written that poem in the book of Psalms. So he says, okay, some people go to do business in deep waters, but while they're on those deep waters, I mean, they get all kinds of waves and the water is beating them and they go high and they go low and they're like, oh my goodness, why did we decide to do this? But it says something that God gets them to their desired haven, meaning
mm,
all the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, and they're like, oh my God, we're done. They still get to their desired goal. So my approach to business is I really want to be clear about my goal. I really want to be clear about my destination. I know I will get there once I'm
mm,
very clear about where I need to. And it's not because I think I have the ability to get myself there. So even if you looked at that poem, once you're on sea and you're trying to get to a place, I mean, the storm could take you off course. It could take you to another seashore or something, but
yeah.
you will get to your desired haven. You will get to where you need to get to. So I guess my approach to problems and challenges is, what's my goal? I always have
Mm,
to remind myself that what do I want to achieve? And I trust that God will make everything work towards me getting to that desired haven or desired goal. I'll
mm,
probably go to a few of my known tricks. I mean, everybody has a few tricks that they've used over the years that they go to. I tend to, I mean, I pray, I trust God. I think once I have that foundation of God is in this with me, I tend to go into study. I try to understand as much of that challenge as I can. It might be my academic bent. I don't know. I'll seek counsel. I'll talk to as many people as possible. If at the very least, it just makes me feel comfortable that at least I'm a little educated about it. I do not see my education of it as the only way a problem gets solved. It's just a tool because I'm like, someday somebody else is going to come into my orbit. They may have the same problem. This knowledge that I have acquired or experience I've gained, I might be able to share it with them so that that way at least their journey becomes a little easier or they could share something with me. So I don't see everything that I know, research, or I found out as the be all end all. It's just a perspective I may have gained. And I don't think I see sometimes the opportunity to learn those things as also an opportunity to share with other people. So the summary of it will be obviously I want to know where I'm going. I want to assure myself that I've got God's backing to be able to get to where I need to. But while I'm at it, I'm learning as much as I can. I'm keeping my ears open just so that that way I can at least round out the experience can be as rounded as possible, not just for me, but for so many other people who may come into my orbit.
Mm, wow, wow, very insightful. So when we talked about life now as an entrepreneur
Yeah.
for you. We didn't really give context, right? So I'm going to give you a bit of context. So you opened your first dental practice. You opened the second location, right? You practice in Indiana. You have a very busy life, yet you are still very involved in your local church, in the local assembly, in family life, and what have you. Now, having two dental practices in Indiana, that is no joke, right? So
Yeah.
I want us to be a bit more specific about, your experience in starting those two practices.
Mhm.
Um, I think you were in Chicago, right? And then you decided, I'm going to go to Indiana and I'm going to do this, even
Yes.
though number one, I'm an immigrant, number two, I'm Black. I don't care about all that. I'm going to make this happen. And here we are today. You are making it happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that was not a walk in the park, I know.
Oh, I wish it was.
tell us a little bit more
So,
about how this happened or played out.
okay, so let's go. So the reason, so business has always been something I wanted to do. I mean, I'm like, you know what, someday I'm going to be doing business. Right after I finished my program at Harvard School of Public Health, I really wanted to go to Harvard Business School. I was like, I'm going to go get I'm going to go to HBS. I'm going to go end up on Wall Street or whatever I needed to do. Then I got talking with a friend of mine and whose brother had been on Wall Street. And I mean, I'd been in Goldman and everything. I was like, you know what? If he was in my shoes, he'd probably be in medical field or dental at that point. I'm like, why are they willing to jump? I'm willing to jump into your world, and you're trying to jump out of their world into my world. So that got me thinking and saying, why does he want to do that? I researched a little bit. I found that I could be a business owner um, and have an edge because now I'll be able to be a clinician, which I may not have been able to do if I was on Wall Street doing all that stuff. And so I just said, you know what? I'm just going to lean into my area of what would you call it, competitive advantage. Because I knew if I was in healthcare and I got a license, then I had an edge, and I could always do an MBA if I decided to do it. So that was my first inkling into, you know what, I'm going to be in the healthcare business. And healthcare in the United States is about 20% of GDP. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, even as a product or as a segment of the economy, it's a huge part of the economy. So I'm like, you know what, why don't you're already licensed, you could be licensed, it's a big part of the economy, you want to do business there, this is a good place to start. So that was my decision for healthcare. Then I got into dental, I got into the dental program, like, okay, what else? I started to do a little bit of research. Then I found out that, okay, you know what, this is a good slice of the healthcare pie too. It's easily 10%, maybe about 5% of the healthcare pie. So I'm like, you know what, it's not the entire market, but even if you're going to be in anything in business, you're still going to have to niche. So it kind of defined my niche for me. So then I decided I was going to be in the dental business. Now, the first practice, obviously, you've never run one before. You have all these ideas and idealism about what a practice should look like. So I go into that community. I'm like, what's the worst that will happen if it doesn't work out? I'm just going to pack my stuff and I'll go elsewhere. But I mean, it's been 10 years. I mean, I've invested much, 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 much more money into the project. So it means two things have happened in that time. Number one, the market has responded very positively to me wanting to even further invest, not just in one practice, but in two. It means the patients have been very responsive, or the customers, for those who don't deal with patients. I mean, you always have to kind of see what message, how am I connecting with the customers? Sometimes you figure it out, sometimes you don't. But as long as they keep coming in, you learn more about yourself. And I'm telling you about your business and how the customers, our consumer is responding to you. So I'd say they've responded positively. The fact that I'm an immigrant, maybe a little darker skinned than most people in my community, it really hasn't mattered. I mean, most of my team members are Caucasian, and sometimes I've had non-Caucasian, but really at the end of the day, people, I mean, I'm a surgeon-ish because I cut people. I mean, I've never cut anybody up and looked and says, "Oh my God, that blood is different." I mean, it's you go in there with this, we all bleed red. So I mean, you go in there with the same values. You try to connect with people. I think honestly, if you really think about it, most human beings are 99.999 the same at the end of the day. I mean, we talk about the same things. We care about our families. We're looking for a way to get ahead. We're looking for some form of security. If you can at least speak to those things with confidence and understanding that really this is what brings us together, I think whichever community you're in, you stand a good chance of being able to not just connect, but to able to serve them. Because at the end of the day, service is what you're trying to do. And service is not really from your perspective, it's really from the perspective of that person you're trying to serve. So essentially, you really have to get into their space, get into their world, understand exactly what the pain point is, what they want to speak about. And then I would say adapt your message, because really you do have a good message. It's just a matter of understanding those things and connecting with them at that level. So being in Indiana, in the communities in which I serve, honestly, I walk around and I don't even remember what I am. I'm just like, I'm here to do.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, very beautiful, very inspiring. How do you connect with difficult people?
Ooh, good question. How do I connect with difficult people? I'll tell you the bad way I've done it, and I've learned the easy way to do it. The bad way I've done it before was to try and convince people. So I used to think people were logical. Okay, because I mean I'm a scientist. I can do math. I mean I'm logical. Life is logical. Lately I'm throwing out the door. Um,
Until I said nope.
no, people are not logical. People don't care. So how do I connect with difficult people? It's all about the emotions. It's people, because difficult people, I've just basically told you that there's something you see that everybody else sees that I refuse to see. And it's good to acknowledge the fact that they don't want to see it. And it's okay. We have to kind of start from that baseline and say, you know what, we're not seeing the same thing, but is it possible for feel something a little different? Or at the very least, acknowledge what you feel. And maybe from there we can at least get it to the next level. So I guess with people, I'm realizing that it's all about the feels. People just care how they feel. They really don't care about what you know. And if you tell them it's the right thing, they're like, I don't see it and I don't want to ever see it. So I guess with people, I don't call it a game. Like it's just a matter of finding a way to meet people where they're at. Of course, you're going to draw your lines, and sometimes the lines have to be very clear. But I think to save ourselves a little bit of heartache and stomach lining, it's always good to start from where they are and help them acknowledge it, or acknowledge it together, and see if you can move just one step further. And the next step further, maybe just drawing the line and say, this is where it ends, and that's good enough. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow.
Mm.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask another approach question.
Sure.
How do you approach mentoring
Mm.
and, learning from people, growth through relationships with people, and what will you learn from them? What's your approach to that?
Ooh, so I'll give you a sneak peek. So my dad died when I was younger. I think I might have been 18 or 19. Gosh, yeah, 18, 19, something right about there when my dad passed. Obviously, he would have. It was my primary mentor growing up. Obviously, you watched him, you observed him, and I'm saying that to say that mentorship is all about people in your space. and the ability for you to be able to get the best you can out of them and keep it for as long as you can. Because sometimes everybody brings a little bit of something at every time. I mentioned this story because I didn't get to spend that length of time, but I got to learn a few things from him on how a man should carry himself, on how you approach problem solving. I'll give an example. Probably was like 12, 13 years old. I needed to solve something, and there was a neighbor or somebody who had something that I could have asked for a favor. So I'm talking to my dad. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to ask that person for the favor. And he gives me a stern look and he's like, have you exhausted all of your options? Never
Mm.
ask anybody for anything until you have made sure that you absolutely need to. And his logic was this is like, if you go and you use up all your bullets or your favor when you
Yeah.
pretty much could have solved it yourself, then
Mm.
you really don't have, you can't go back to that person when you absolutely need to. And amongst
Yeah.
other lessons that you get to pick
Mm.
with
That
people.
was a great lesson. Mm.
Yeah. And I'll tell you how it's played out with him and with other people. You then start to see that people come into your life for certain seasons. I mean, your biological dad is someone you wish would be with you forever, but no, it doesn't happen that
Mm.
way. It's never going to happen that way for anybody, for anybody. But then God brings all these father figures into your lives and people whom you're going to be able to observe for a season. They give you one other nugget or something. I mean, they give you love, obviously. Love meaning there's somebody who supports you, and it doesn't have to be support in the way you think about it. Just know that there's goodwill. So I think
Yeah.
about a lot of people who had goodwill for me, who probably
Mm.
identified the struggle, the help I needed at that point. They were able to offer counsel. And with
Mm.
that counsel, I just added to my arsenal. I just added into my modes of engagement and living life. Then you kind of move on. And one of the things I'm learning to do with those people also is I'm learning to give feedback to say, hey, thank you. What you said really made a difference because I'm
Mm.
getting older now and I say all kinds of things and I don't even know if what I'm saying makes sense to the people that I'm saying it to. So sometimes it's
Please
always
go
good when
ahead.
somebody,
Makes sense.
yeah. So it would be nice if somebody says, you know what you said made sense. I'm like, tell me what I said because I don't remember what I said. So that way you're not the one benefiting from what I said, but I'm benefiting from what I said because I probably said it in the
Mm.
moment. I probably said it based on how I felt and I saw it at
Mm.
that moment. So I think the summary of it is I've had people come into my lives at different seasons. I've had them leave um, sometimes tangible deposits in counsel, love, direction, sometimes not as much, but you just kind of feel the goodwill and then you're able to actively utilize it and just grow it into something you could use for yourself. Yeah, I mean, there's a gentleman that I'm kind of engaging with now. I mean, he's rich. I mean, very rich. Okay, so I mean, every opportunity I get to see him, I'm like, okay, tell me what you did today. What are you doing? What are you working on? I mean, and I'll say this too for anybody who is learning to be mentored by any of these really ultra high net worth people. I mean, your game has to be solid. So I'll make fun of myself. So we're hanging out, and I mean, billionaire. I mean, billionaire status, easy. Okay, and we're talking, and it's like, um, all, gas has been something about gas and something, and I just said, oh yeah, per gallon, and he looks at me, no, per barrel. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm like, we're not thinking gallons here, we're thinking barrels. I'm like, nah. So,
How did you leave that moment down? How
oh,
did
I'm like, hey, I'm coming back for more. So I mean, when you're talking gallons and you're thinking barrels, and there was another
the
conversation
point?
we're
Yeah.
having recently too. I had one of those moments, and he said something. I said something about taxes, and he came at it from. I'm like, yeah, that's true. There are other people live like that. Yeah. So the point is, I think sometimes to be mentored, you've got to up your game too because sometimes there's all kinds of information that fly
Yeah.
across, but you're missing
Mm-hmm.
it because you're not
Yeah.
you're missing it. So there was an idea that I was like, oh, I'm thinking about ABCD, and it's like, oh, it's special purpose vehicle. I'm like, I think I've heard that before, but I don't really know what that is. And I'm thinking, I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, special purpose vehicle. Then I'm kind of googling, and it's so I'm like, for you to really be able to get the best out of people who maybe way out of your league, there's a need for
Yeah.
you to step up because they don't necessarily have to step down to your level, but you're
Yes.
forced to step up
You
to
have
their
to step
level
up.
and their language and their worldview. And that's where the growth happens. That's where the magic happens. Because if you're able to do that well enough, then if you're able to keep up with the conversation a little better than you did the last time, then you've grown. And then, of course, you're not just trying to show off or something, but you're just trying to at least learn from them. So I would say it's
Mhm.
two ways. It's me being able to feel the love, support, and ask for counsel, but it's a step up. It's a don't talk in
So
gallons,
how do
talk in
you do? How
bars.
do you step up rapidly? How do you up your game, expedite that process, where from one conversation with somebody at that level to the next, you have grown, right, in your ability to receive more from them or digest what they are giving you.
I mean, once I'm done, I get my piece of paper and I write down. I'm like, we talked about A, B, C, D, E, and I'm like, put it away, and I ruminate over it, and I'm like, what does that mean? Then I do a little bit of research because I know at that level they're not going to explain that to you. I'm like,
Yeah.
no way. There's no why you explain. I mean, I'm smart enough to be able to figure it out. So I'll say the first thing is number one, be aware of what was said that you missed and say, okay. I mean, and sometimes you don't want to tell them to slow down and could you repeat that? They're like, why am I repeating that for you? So, number one, to acknowledge the fact that some things were said that I didn't understand. But one of the things I found about knowledge is you just have to be curious. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes you're not interacting with a mentor to impress him or one way or the other. You're just trying to learn and trying to add value. So, if you're truly, truly curious about the world you live in, then chances are that you will have other things added to you that you're like, that's it. That's what we
Mhm.
talked about. That
Yeah.
makes sense. And that, so I think it's really a curiosity about life and about the things that you think interest you, and just
Mhm.
see everything as part of your journey. So that if there's one or two things that were said, like special purpose vehicles, what are those? I mean, write it down, make sense of it. Once we were having conversation, and it was like, oh yeah, in the 80s, I made a couple million, couple hundred million, and it was through cell phone towers. I'm like, what?
What? Your head is spinning and you are trying to get it to stop.
To stop,
Like,
but now fast forward to a few months ago, I kind of stumbled on some tech telecoms thing. So I'm learning a little bit about telecoms. I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably what it was. Now, if I have to go back and have conversation, I can look back to that conversation and say, tell me a little bit more about that. What licenses were you getting? What deal? What made the environment favorable for you to invest? Because now it's probably 2 3 years since we had that conversation, but 2 3 years out, I know a little bit more. I can look back to that, understand the context in which that was done, and then be able to say, so what did you do? How did it turn out for you? So it may not happen the very first day, but as long as you're engaged and listening, there's a chance that you look back to it and then be able to learn something. Just
yes.
my own
Mhm.
little way of
That's
approaching.
such valuable information to have. Thanks for sharing that, because I think sometimes people feel so stupid,
Mm,
right,
mm,
that they don't know something, or something was just said that was, over their heads, said over their heads and stuff, such. And they don't go back to maybe re-examine the situation and determine how they could better handle something like that if
yeah,
it comes up again. Rather, they just, withdraw from that relationship maybe, and start feeling uncomfortable about with being around people who talk in ways that they don't understand, or you know bring up subjects that they are just not able to comprehend.
yeah,
So it's very important to hear that approach,
yeah.
because I think that feeling stupid because you don't understand something is actually quite harmful, right? It deters growth and deters our ability to absorb knowledge.
Yeah,
So, right. So I think some of what you are saying is that some things you are exposed to won't make sense right now, but give it time and don't make it about yourself and
yeah,
about how you feel.
yeah.
think of it as growth.
Yeah.
Okay, there's opportunity for me to grow some more, and that's part of life. Last year I talked a lot about exposure and
Mm,
different people's approach to exposure to new things. And some people just don't like feeling uncomfortable.
mm,
That discomfort that comes from a need to grow.
mm,
And I think we just need to be able to sit with that uncomfortable feeling
mm,
until it's kind of, ebbs. And then we we have more insight on how to better ourselves in one field or the other, or one topic or the other. I hope what I'm saying makes
Oh yes,
some
you're
sense.
spot on. Yeah, I mean
Mm,
who likes to feel stupid? I mean, every day, I mean, you want to get into you want to be I mean, you want to at least be able to hold your own and let people don't think you're dumb. But I think I'm over it now. I'm like, yeah, there's so many rooms I'm gonna be in. I'm just gonna be like, I mean, I was having a conversation with someone, a good friend of mine. He was asking me for, I mean, we're kind of talking about business, and he was asking me for mentorship in some real estate things I'm doing. And he's using terms, and I'm like, slow down. What did you just say? He's like, oh,
mm.
I said, I don't know what that is. He's like, you don't, I'm like, tell me what it is.
Tell me
I know
what
I'm
it
supposed
is.
to, you're,
Yeah.
you're supposed to be picking my brains,
Mhm.
but you're saying things I don't understand. I'm like, can you please explain that to me? So I think I've gotten to that place where, depending on the setting, if it's a very close friend and you say something, I'm like, please make it make sense to me. That doesn't make sense.
Yes.
If I'm in a
Yeah.
slightly less this thing, I make a mental note of it and say maybe I need to check that out. And if it's somebody I can
Mhm.
say, please slow down and could you explain how that works with this? I have
Mm.
absolutely no problems telling people
Yeah.
that didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand it. Can you go over it? Or maybe just go back on my own time. So I don't have to be the smartest. I mean, there's so many things I'm ignorant of that I'm like, you know what? I mean, so the way I look at knowledge is I just look at knowledge as a sea of, think about it as it's a sea. I mean, throw me in a sea. I mean, I'm like, there's so many things I could explore, okay, on
Yeah.
their own. Then there's so many interrelationships within things that even make for new things. So I'm just like, it's endless. Just tell me, I don't know. If I don't know, I don't know.
That I love it. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What qualities make that possible for you? Would you say it's humility? Would you say it's self-awareness? Um, would you say it's experience?
Hmm. So I'll tell you, I've got biases. I've got my faith bias, okay? And my faith bias makes me realize that I think the ultimate thing in life is to know God, okay? And I'll weave it into what makes it. And I think to really understand the world is it gives you a good sense of who God is. Okay. I mean, why would you make the sun, the stars, the moon, and everything? I mean, it's so complicated, but everything is so interrelated. I mean, you would think, I mean, what's the relationship between the lion, who is supposed to be the most the most ferocious, this thing in the animal kingdom, and the guy he feeds on, and everything works in some kind of harmony. I think honestly, my approach to knowledge and knowing is everything finds its unity in God, ultimately. And I'm very comfortable with not knowing because I know that when I step back, I'll see everything in God and I'll see where it all
Yeah.
fits. So it kind of makes me comfortable. So I wouldn't even say so much humility. I just think that ultimately, when it's all summed up, it's summed up in a person's love for human beings and the ability for them to thrive in him. So that
Mm.
as you step zoom in and zoom out and you pan in and pan out and you do all these things, I don't know, there's just a reassurance to me that, you know what, it's all summed up in God loves me and I'm fine. So I'm like,
Yes.
we
It's
know the
all
way it all
summed up in
ends.
what we learned in Sunday school. Jesus
Yeah,
loves me, this I
Jesus loves me.
know.
This I know for the Bible. So I'm able to pan in, pan out, zoom this way, zoom that way, and everything. And when those moments of like, I can't seem to figure it out now, I'm like, fine, let's move on to the next thing. Yeah. So that kind
Now
of keeps
let's
me.
flip. Oh, go ahead. You were
So
saying
that kind
something.
of keeps me grounded, and like, yeah, it's a big deal, but it's not such a big deal at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love it.
yeah.
Now let's flip this and talk about your approach to mentoring others. Um, how do you decide that somebody, or determine that somebody is worth the investment in time, in energy, in effort to, I mean, to mentor?
I should be asking you that question.
No, I'm the one asking questions today.
Pastor Pipe, you're the one who should be giving me all the tips and tricks on how to mentor people. My batting average, I don't even know what my batting average is. My approach right now is I tend to come at things with the knowledge. I just have a knowledge bias. I have a desire to know. But I don't think that's all that there is to life. I think there's also a being that people just appreciate. So I'll give an example. So someone comes to meet me today and they have a business idea or they're going through things. My default is to offer counsel, because I think counsel, I always assume counsel is what people need, but I'm learning that no, they don't always need counsel. Sometimes they just need your presence. Sometimes they just need your reassurance. They don't need your words per se. Sometimes they just need your presence. And I'm learning to make that discernment to say, you know what? Sometimes I just want to be present. It could be once a month, once a year, once in 2 years, or the very fact that you observe me and you find some value in how I do things, how I operate, and how I solve my problem. If that's of value to you, then that's fine. I don't even have to say a thing if that's value to you. So I'm learning to be able to offer value by the way I live, by the way I operate, by decisions I make. Okay, I know that, you know what, should someone ask me, so what did you do that? I'll tell them that this was how I arrived at my conclusion. And if it makes sense to you, go ahead and do it. Before I even start to offer counsel and begin to really, really give of my time. Why have I taken that approach? Obviously, I think the best thing we can give to people is the power of an example, just the way you operate and you do things. And I think it's more instructive than anything you could say, because people are going to forget. But when they find that there's something about you that connects with them in that moment, then you may have helped them solve the problem. And their minds will go places that you never even could have gone. Meaning, they're like, oh, no, you're able to do this. You know what? Maybe I can do X, Y, Z. And you're like, I didn't even think that far out. So I think people do have capacity in themselves to be able to solve problems by themselves. I think what we do as mentors is to give them belief, give them permission to go ahead and be all that they are supposed to be, not necessarily by talking to them. They have it all in them. They know what to do. It may not be immediately apparent. The goal will be to just be someone that lets that light shine, let that idea blossom. And it comes in many ways, but less by words, more by just being the power of a good example. And if they need counsel, you give it, or act as a pointer to what's possible.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Oh wow.
mm,
Wow. I love that.
mm,
That's very insightful. A unique approach to it really. Yeah. And really as you were saying that, I I thought of a few things which um it's quite insightful, because I've seen that too, that people can do much more than you can even imagine. And
yeah,
as you give them pointers, you are sort of removing barriers in their path to
yeah,
expressing their greatness, their uniqueness, and they end up impressing you, you
yeah,
know, at the end
yeah,
of the day. Thank you for
yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah, I do
So
believe
as
that people,
okay,
I just believe
yes,
that people have that capacity, and it's like you said, it's giving them permission that yes, you can.
yeah.
You can. Yeah, it's okay to be confused right now, but you do have the direction. You can make the
Mhm.
right call in that
Yeah.
moment, they and that's when they just go. And honestly, that's all you want them to do. You just express your best self and just be a light, and let's what you saw, let's what you do, all you're capable of
Mhm.
doing. And
Mhm.
that's good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Spoken like a true mentor to many.
Oh, I won't go that far. I won't go
So,
that far.
as a busy man, as an entrepreneur, how do you avoid burnout? How do you avoid it personally, and what would you advise other entrepreneurs to watch out for? Um, in order to avoid,
Right now.
you
Good
know.
question. Um, it's not that serious. It is serious, but it's not that serious. So my thinking is at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I mean, probably you will remember what I mean. People will remember what you've done, but I'll give an example. So I'm sorry, I've got a fake bias, but I would share it still. I would share it the same. So David was a man in the Bible who was notorious for, oh no, I won't say notorious. There wasn't anything bad, but he was a good king for Goliath, very powerful man. Then someday he says, "Hey, I'm gonna build God a temple," and but look at the sequence of thoughts. He's like, "I'm gonna build you a temple, but you don't live in houses." And God says, "Okay, I don't want a temple." Then he says, "Okay, go ahead. You won't build a temple." So I'm thinking to myself, you know, this person doesn't need a house, but you're still gonna build him a house, and if history plays out the way it says, the house and the place where the person wants to be is in people's hearts, but you still do it.
Yeah.
So here's my theory. Everything we do at the end of the day is temporal. It really, it just serves a temporal purpose with an eternal significance. Okay. So that at the end of the day, I mean, I don't care what you build. Someday somebody else is going to buy it, sell it,
Mm,
use it or something. So that essentially, it's kind of to give yourself permission to maybe speed up if your mind is playing tricks with you and say, hey, the business is going to be somebody's going to steal it from you. I'm like, oh, are you speeding it up by a few years? Because someday it's going to be somebody's business at the end of the day. So you're like, okay,
yeah.
sure. Meaning, give yourself permission to be human, to
Mm,
enjoy the things of life.
yes.
So I would say
Yeah.
it is serious, but at some point, really, is it really that serious? I mean,
Mm,
your thing is to you to do it with everything you've got. So my approach to burnout is this: I go at 100 when I get the opportunity, and once I don't have 100 to give, I'm done. I'm done.
thank you.
And I'm like, I did my best. I'm like, what else do you want me to do? I mean, I give it 100. So, but practically, I go hard when I'm doing things. I think I go hard. I used to feel bad years before that. How come everybody's going at whatever percentage they are, and I'm going at 100, and I'm still thinking that there's still a little more I can. There's still a little more gas in the
Told
tank
you.
for me to go. But I think I've come to realize that that's just the way I'm wired and that's who I am. But when I'm not working, I switch off and I'm like, you know what? It's time to play. Let's have fun.
Yeah. Tomorrow is
Let's
another
unite.
day.
Oh,
Shut
tomorrow is
down for
another day.
today. Tomorrow is another day.
Tomorrow,
Mm.
next month, next year, we'll do it again. We'll get the opportunity to do it. Now, that confidence comes from the fact that I think honestly, when you've made that commitment, I mean, I know a few years, when you know you've made that commitment, you're this is who I am and this is what I stand for. I think
Mm.
going in and out of seasons of intensity is a little easier because you're not. I mean, I'm like, this is what I do. If I step away from it for a minute, a day, a week, a month, I'm still going to come back to this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to recharge, to refresh. And if there's anything that gets done over my head in that time, that's fine. We'll pick it up from there. So I think it's just the fact that maybe I struggled. I was like, am I sure this is what I want to do? If I leave it for a minute, they will leave me, they will pass me, they will overtake me. Are over. I don't even care. It goes ahead of me, fine. Whenever I step back in,
Fine.
I'm just going to continue from where I stopped and I'll go from there. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to kind of segue from there. Like, what's your approach to that, to competition and, comparisons? How much do you allow people to influence you in terms of inspiring you, but not influence you beyond what you are able to do, beyond what's healthy, right?
mm,
So how do you balance that?
I'm very competitive. I mean, I'm uber competitive. When I was a kid, anytime we played games and I lost, it was hell for everybody. As in, I made everybody know that I don't like losing. Okay, I still don't like losing, but what? But I've learned that some days you're going to take the L's. Just take the
You
L
were
and just
that kid, huh?
I was. I mean, when I played soccer then, I mean, I had to win. I mean, But after you learn to, and I won't say take the L's like you lose like that, but you're like, you know what? It's not a big deal. I mean, I'm not always going to be the star. There were days I was a star player and I was peacocking and everything, and all of a sudden a new kid comes on the block. I mean, my approach to it is say, okay, let's see what he's doing. Can I do the same? And some days you're like, yeah, he's better than me, man. He good. You're like, but that doesn't mean I was bad, right? It's just better.
Yes, that's true. The
Yeah,
fact that someone is better at something doesn't mean you are bad.
yeah,
You're
no,
just better at it.
it's just, I mean, he's just had a better game than me. So my approach to it is there's always going to be somebody who's going to have a better game than me at a point in time. The caveat also to it is I want to be inspired by you, okay? I want to be inspired to be the better version of myself. Because one of the things I've also found is people can shine and peter out. I mean, the fact that you come on the scene and you're the new kid on the block and you're shining doesn't mean you're going to sustain it. So why am I going to
Yeah.
be threatened? I mean, I know my values. I know how long I want to play my game. I know what games
Yes.
I want to win at. So if today you come on the scene and you're the new kid on the block, I'm going to learn everything you're doing because I'm competitive, okay? But I'm not going to be competing with you. I'm not going to be looking at you and say, "Oh, you stole my shine." I'm just like, you know what? What can I use for my game? Remember when I said
Yeah.
about getting to my destination? I'm all about
Mhm.
getting to my goal. Once I get to
Yeah.
my goal, I'm done. So essentially, I use people. I mean, everybody around me, I'm learning. Um, it's that balance of being inspired by people, taking everything they can I'm going
Yeah.
to get everything I can from you. I will
Mhm.
get as much as I can from you. I'm going to ask you so many questions about what you're doing because I really want to understand the game, but I want to see how I can adapt it to my game, how can I
Yeah.
adapt it to my end goal. And how do I look at people? I do respect people's games, but it's a marathon. I mean, there have been things that I started. I'm just like, oh man, I've petered out on this thing. I wish somebody
Yeah.
could give me a little bit of a pick me up. So people's journey doesn't really, honestly, I don't pay more attention to it than what I see right there and right then for the value that it gives me. And at some
Yeah.
point, if we meet down the road, fine. And if you're like, you know what, you're done, and that's all the game you wanted to play, fine too. So
Mhm. Mhm.
kind of makes it a little easier on me to see people.
Yeah.
I see people in time, but I also see people in the arc of time. And I also
Yeah.
want to be able to run my own journey, see myself where I'm at, but look at it over an arc of time.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. You've shared a lot, many insightful things, many rich things with us
Thank you.
today. And it's been a delight to have you on the show. Um,
Thank you.
I think there's still some areas I'd like us to go deeper into. So I think that we definitely need to have you back. Need
Oh,
back at some point if you will accept our invitation, the
who am
invitation
I?
to come.
No, no. I mean, my basic approach is, I mean, we all experience life. I mean, I think what makes life fun is just learning, just observing. I mean, observing what is going on around you with people, with you, and share what you see. People may say, hey, that doesn't make sense. You're like, okay, yeah, it made sense to me then, but I agree with you, it really doesn't make sense. And if you're like, yeah, that really did make sense, you're like, sure, okay, yeah, that's true. That's so I guess it's just I think life is just to be experienced for what it is. Um,
Yeah.
with your faith lenses on, because obviously if you just try to look at it for what it is, then it covers you in all kinds of ways. It plays all kinds of mind games on you. But if you look at it with the right set of lenses,
Yeah.
there's a good chance you make better interpretations. I mean, I say this, that we don't see with our eyes, we see with our minds. And
Yes, we do.
yeah, so as we start to engage and with people, then the experiences we have with the five senses or even with our feelings, it takes a whole new meaning because there's a software that is running in there helping you to interpret things slightly better than you otherwise would have.
So what's next? What's next for Bunmi Adekugbe? What mountain is he looking to conquer next? What?
I want to be able to keep up. I'm trying to keep up with the big boys so that once they are talking, it's not just flying over my head. but all kidding aside, I mean, what's next for me? Hmm. I think growth. I think growth, I mean, growth not just for yourself, but to see other people around you grow, flourish. Um, I've been blessed with a lot. I jokingly say, I mean, there's no institution you can go in the world that, I mean, there's nothing you're going to use to phase me. I'm sorry. You're going to have to try real hard to try and impress me with what you know. You're going to have to work really hard. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that I'm not the smartest mind in the world by any stretch of the imagination, not even close. But I'm only trying to say that there's just a way one can engage life that there's value being exchanged. And sometimes it's just in those little moments, it's in those packets of engagement that moves things forward. So I guess for me, it's just to see a lot more of that, and to almost catch lightning in a bottle, to have those moments that it can only be God, when an idea meets a person and an
Yeah.
opportunity. And I mean, I'm looking for those kinds of things, because I think that's the fun part. That's fun when it all comes together and you're like, how? I
Oh,
mean,
that's
I
good to
mean,
hear, God.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, how did this combine with this at this time and that? And it just blossoms into something that it's mind blowing, and nobody
Mm.
can really say, oh, it was that factor, this factor, that factor. I mean, I want to say I want to say a lot of those. I think that's what makes life interesting. That's fun.
Wow, thank you so much. You've made entrepreneurship sound like so much fun, and we've enjoyed hearing your approach to so many different things
Thank you.
in life in general.
Thank
And
you.
it's been very inspiring, very encouraging, very insightful. And yeah, I know that anyone who watches this will get a lot from it. So thank you for sharing so freely from your
Thank,
wealth of knowledge and experience.
thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Any last words for our viewers today?
None.
None until next time. All
Thank
right.
you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Career Journeys, where we tell stories that inspire. I invite you to join us next time on another episode. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.